Hi, welcome to Manas Shil YouTube channel. Before we start, kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you. Let's start the video. If you haven't watched the previous video, I'll link it in the description box, or you can click here. Chapter 3. Reminiscences of the Clowns. Gathering of Strongest. Zalario's subordinates, even his confidant Dallas, were only second in rank. The undead elf should have been used only for the seraphim, in order to gather a large and unshakable force. Oh well. We don't know how many pillars we can summon, so there's no rush. I'll talk to Feldway about this later. Zalario thought about it, and was about to leave the place. But then, he heard the sound of shattering glass. The culture tank had been destroyed. Wait. I'll never forgive you for ripping my arm off. It's you, I'll get it back. With the device shut down, Vega woke up, and began to move. And his target was Gnome, who had fused with Vega's cells. Gooba, Gugugu, Gooba. Before anyone could stop him, Vega's arm grabbed Gnome. Then the fusion began, and Gnome was absorbed by Vega. Oh, that's delicious. My power is getting stronger. Vega was delighted. He sensed that the gnome guy he had absorbed had a huge amount of magicules, and that it had boosted his strength. Kukakakakaka. This guy is good. Now, I can take any bastard I want, Vega's climax ended the moment he locked eyes with Zalario. I've heard a lot about you. You can either join us, or you can stay here and fight. Vega was asked this question, but he already knew his answer. Sorry. I got carried away. Of course, I'll follow you. That kind of filthiness was quite impressive at this point. Zalario was not dismayed, as this attitude was within expectations. He knew it, and accepted it. The loss of Gnome was unfortunate, but it did help to strengthen Vega. What was needed for the future battles was not an army, but individual heroes. The more powerful allies they had, the better. Besides, Gnome had just lost his ego, so his value as a pawn had diminished. In fact, it was better for him to become Vega's ally here. Zalario was cruel and ruthless to his subordinates who had served him since long ago, but that was just his true nature. The others had no problem with it, as long as it was Zalario's decision. Vega's outburst was forgiven, and he was treated as one of them. Kaguli, who was watching the whole thing, could not help but feel disgusted. Vega's attitude was horrible, but it was hard to understand what kind of thought process Zalario had, who had tolerated it so easily. She couldn't read Zalario's thoughts, because he didn't seem to be similar to Yuki. Yuki was well aware of the dangers of Vega, and handled him well. But Zalario, on the other hand, probably doesn't even think Vega is dangerous. Does that mean he is that much more capable? Kaguli judged that from the situation, she was correct. Zalario did not even care about the current Vega. Even his own subordinates were only slightly useful tools. But this was not arrogance. It was not arrogance, because Zalario's perception was correct. Zalario's nature of grasping information correctly was far from arrogance. Kaguli, however, could not possibly understand such a thing, and was left confused. Hey, Kaguli, isn't it? And Yuki wasn't like that either. Well, we're all friends, so let's get along. Kaguli was noticed by Vega, who called out to her. There's no way that the current Kaguli can beat Vega. Besides, even if Tyr and Footman had challenged Vega, the odds would have been about 50-50. Since Yuki was still deprived of his free will, she decided that it would be best to just stay in line. Right. Our circumstances have changed a lot, so let's continue to get along. Oh, yeah. Anyway, where am I? Where are we? It's called the Heavenly Star Palace. It looks like there's no way to escape, so we'll just have to obey those people. I see. Well, I don't need to run away. I'm sure they'll need my help anyway, so I'll just enjoy the situation. Kaguli envied Vega's simplicity. Zalario didn't seem to like it, but the intentions of those controlling Yuki were unknown. Kaguli thought that the Demon Death birthday spell would be a trump card for her and others, but she was not sure about that either. In the first place, a ritual that required tens of thousands of corpses was not something that could be easily handled. We need to make them think we're useful somehow. If worst comes to worst, we'll survive, even if we have to flatter them. Kaguli thought as such. It was out of the question to abandon their ambitions after all this time. She had decided that now was the time for surrender, and was ready to throw away her pride. And that resolve would soon be put to the test. Michael and Feldway had returned. In the center of the castle, there was an audience hall. There was no one on the throne. It had been empty for a long time. Chairs were arranged in the hall, and people were sitting as they pleased. Michael was seated in the chair closest to the throne. Standing next to him was Feldway, staring at the gathered people. In addition to Zalario and the others, Kagulli's group was also there. Dino and his group came without skipping a beat. The newborn undead elves had also been brought there. And that wasn't all. A bear and her confidant from the Palace of Monsters had also been summoned. A bear had only one confidant, named Gnome. The others were killed in the battle against the cryptids. As you can see from this, a bear is the one who was in charge of the toughest battlefield. Oma had lost both her eyes when she became a Yama, but instead she had a single eye that could see everything. Her mouth had been sewn shut, and she communicated only by telepathy, not with words. Despite her eerie appearance, she was a former cherub and a veteran warrior who has followed a bear for a long time. The bear and the others were not the only ones Feldway brought. There was the insector, with whom he had fought for what seemed like an eternity, and with whom he was now in an alliance with. Insect Lord Zelanus, and the 12 insect generals, who were his confidants, had gathered together. However, there were only 8 of them now, not 12. One of the missing members was Razzle, the guardian god of the West. He invaded the cardinal world more than 2,000 years ago under the command of Zelanus, but betrayed him and became an ally of the chosen hero Grambel. He was a bug-type magician, insector, who had been defeated by Xian and Ranga. The other was Minaza, who was sent by Zelanus to help Emperor Rudra after he was promised half the world. He had also been defeated by Xian, though by a strange coincidence. Their other 2 were escaped larvae born of the replacement. One of them was also a direct descendant of Zelanus, so a secret search order had been issued. It was still missing. Each of the 8 currently present, like Razzle and Minaza, had a fighting ability comparable to that of an awakened demon lord. Among them, Zes, a direct descendant of Zelanus and the commander of the bug generals, boasted a strength that set him apart from the others. He was Zalario's rival, and they had competed with each other to the death. The strength of the remaining 7 was on a par with the others. Bethub, who had the characteristics of a bee and a grasshopper. Mujika, who looked like an anthropomorphic centipede. Tisorn, who was like a mantis. Torin, a dragonfly with wings. A Bart, with spider-like limbs on his back. Cyril, a venomous scorpion. Peliad, beautiful as a damselfly. All of them with their own peculiarities were standing in silence, not even sitting on chairs. It was a large room, but the oppressive feeling made it seem smaller. Kagulli was afraid, but decided to let things happen as they would. After everyone had been assembled, the meeting with Michael began. Gentlemen, with Rudra gone, Michael Sama is free. And as a first step towards Veldanava Sama's resurrection, we have succeeded in expelling Velgrund. The plan is now. At that moment, Zalario stepped forward to speak. Normally, he would not interrupt his superior Feldway, but this time he decided that it was urgent. Feldway Sama, please hold. It seems that there is a difference in perception. Feldway was in a good mood, but his smile disappeared at Zalario's words. What? He became a little sullen and asked. Velgrund is alive and well. And because of her, Cornu has been destroyed. Even Zelanus twitched at this remark. Feldway frowned in displeasure. The demon lord Remura was an annoying new interloper, but the plan had gone well. The Crimson and Remura Tempest would both be obstacles, but Veldanava's resurrection was still imminent. Of the 3 remaining true dragons on Earth, Velgrund's dragon factor had been obtained, and he was ready to obtain the other 2. However, if Zalario's words were true, it meant that there would be a major deviation from the plan. And, as if to confirm his words, Cornu's presence had disappeared. His presence was nowhere to be found, neither here at the Heavenly Star Palace, nor in the Palace of Monsters in the Otherworld. Are you sure? It's true. Because of Cornu's disappearance, the plan failed. We had no choice but to retreat. I didn't think your plan would fail, but I guess the blame lies with your ineptitude, right? It was Dino, not Zalario, who answered. Dino was more tactful than Zalario, in that he even shifted the blame for the failure of the plan. Zalario tacitly accepted it. He didn't think that Dino's opinion was correct, but he also didn't think it was necessary to deny it. Zalario, who was fair-minded and strict with himself, could be flexible. With such a reaction from both of them, Feldway had no choice but to stop doubting. Unexpectedly, Feldway was in a foul mood. However, his mind was clear, and he quickly devised a countermeasure. The first thing to do was to secure a true dragon. Since the dragon factor was essential to Veldanava's resurrection, it was only natural that this would be the first priority. Fortunately, Velgrund's dragon factor had already been secured. Although he hadn't expected to come back to this world, it wasn't the worst situation. Still, it was a rather painful mistake. I was careless. I retrieved the skill, because it was going to disappear anyway, but as a result, the control circuit also disappeared. I banished her to the far side of time and space, so that she would not be an enemy even if she resurrected, but now I have increased the number of troublesome enemies. At that time, Belgrind had lost most of her power. On top of that, the dragon factor had been taken from her, and she was on the verge of disappearing. That's why Michael retrieved the Charity King, Rigel, but there was no way he could have predicted that this would lead to the destruction of Cornu. Never mind. As long as Veldanava-sama is resurrected, the rest is not important. Let's leave the Velgrind matter alone, and have Velzer join us first. This time, he would careful not to make her disappear, and let her join with some free will. This would help against Velgrind, and would also help them capture Vildor. Once they had Velzerd in the group, what would they do next? He had planned to go after Vildor right away, but now needed to reconsider this. If we're going to be facing Velgrind as well, we'd better get our forces up to speed. I thought that Michael and I could handle it, but you can never be too careful. Dino had just told him that he wasn't thinking clearly. That's why Feldway decided to drastically change his original plan. In that case, it seems we need to take immediate action. Let's take Velzerd in first. This time, let's not banish her to the far reaches of space-time, and instead use her as an ally. There's no other choice. It would be more prudent to eliminate as many uncertainties as possible, and begin the final ritual once the 3 true dragons have been captured. Michael nodded in agreement with Feldway's words. Velzerd was given the ultimate skill Patience King, Gabriel, by Veldanava. In other words, since the control circuit was active, she could be added to the team safely and reliably. The problem was what happened after that. Michael's eyes scanned over the group. I didn't think it was necessary, but we should incarnate them all. That way, we can deal with whatever happens. Indeed. Let's leave Vildor for later, and finish all possible preparations first. The conversation between Feldway and Michael progressed, and a conclusion was reached. In anticipation of this, Zalario made a report. On that note, I have something to report. What is it? The attempt to incarnate using Vega there has failed. The only surefire way is to possess the undead elf. So then 9 people. It's a little difficult to decide who to incarnate. So Feldway pondered. Here's what Zelanus had to say. Do what you want with those undead elves. We don't need them. In the event of an emergency, the insectors were able to create bodies that look like solidified magicules. That's why they can enter any world. While it would be useful to have the undead elves, it was not necessary. In fact, that is what happened with Minaza. She took in the materials of that world and incarnated them, and the insectoids she summoned had been confirmed to have the same properties. This is why, while it was difficult to cross worlds, once they had crossed over to another world, they were able to fully exercise their unrivaled power. This time, the problem of crossing worlds had been solved. It was natural for Zelanus to give in. If he didn't need to consider his allies, he could choose from among the phantoms. In that case, the right choice would be to choose the strongest and most useful. Zalario and Iber, of the 3 phantom commanders, will be chosen. Shall we fill the remaining 7 positions with the executives? I have an opinion on that as well. You're welcome to speak freely. Thank you. Seeing this, Dino thought to himself, Zalario is a serious man, unlike me. With permission, Zalario spoke up. Unlike us primordials, those below the cherubs are weak-willed. In the other world, they would be able to fight by force, but in the future, I'm afraid that we won't be able to count on them as a fighting force. Then what do you suggest? Yes. Rather, why don't we leave the race for survival in the hands of nature? Zalario had abandoned his subordinates. As was the case with Cornu's men, they had been taken over by the humans who had possessed them in the other world when they had invaded, and had thus lost their sense of self. And now, under the influence of Vega's cells, their emotions were running wild. It was unlikely that giving such people a valuable substitute would help them in the coming battle. There are still many who stand in our way. Velgrind, Vildor, and the demon lords are still alive. Even those damned demons will interfere, those tools that do nothing more than follow orders. Not worth it. By your will. In response to Zalario's statement, Feldway nodded, for he too was concerned about the same thing. Yes. What matters is the strength of will. If one doesn't have a strong enough desire, giving them an ultimate skill is meaningless. To put it another way. No matter how strong the ego was, there was no need to worry about betrayal if he gave them the ultimate enchantment alternative. Feldway looked at Michael, and their gazes met. Apparently, he had another opinion. What is your opinion? I was going to call in the Seraphim, and possess them with the all-powerful army of angels. Armageddon. That's fine, but we don't know how many can be called, or what kind of will they'll possess. Do we? 7 at most can be called. But whether the seraphim have a will or not is something we won't know until we summon them. If an undead elf possesses a seraphim, it will be more powerful than an awakened demon lord. However, its strength of will was something to worry about. As was the case with themselves, it took many years for their egos to be established. Feldway's conclusion was that a hastily developed force would be useless. Here is what Zelanus had to say. Interesting. If you have any seraphim left over, why don't I or my children eat them? Feldway thought about this as well. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoy it.